Sure.
So we're going to be talking about the Conjuration of the Seven, which is the next one. Last week we talked about the Conjuration of the Four. Everybody had a chance to look. You don't have a copy of that, do you?
No, I've been keeping up with videos.
Are you? Okay, good. Well, I got a copy. If you
Yeah, I'll
want.
take that.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's cool. Down here, Conjuration. There you go. The Conjuration of the Seven is kind of the continuation. It's the one that you would do after that. And the Conjuration of the Seven we're talking about are basically the seven planetary bodies. And if you can remember from the very first information overload Kabbalah lecture we did, there was the seven doubles. Remember the letters that were seven? Not that you have to remember exactly what letters they were, but there were seven doubles. There's 3 mothers, 7 doubles, 12 elementals. And the 7 doubles represented this idea of polarity. So that, like say the thing is temperature, you have hot, you have cold. There's varying degrees of the same thing, right? This is what we're going to be talking about in this conjuration too. We're going to be using basically the positive polarity to conjure the negative polarity, and then we're going to look at what that means internally. A lot of the stuff that was left is from Samael's work about him going to the astral plane and conjuring these things and seeing them. And we're going to keep in mind that this is the astral interpretation of these. But that the more important for us, the interpretation that we should be more concerned with is our own internal psychological interpretation of what these mean. So would you like, maybe I should hand out a copy first so you can follow along if you want to.
And there are 7 of us here.
Yeah.
Pardon?
You need more light, mate.
Sure, yeah. Do you want
Read.
to, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to read.
5, 6, 7.
I have the book too, if you guys want to read the book. To go with the movie. I have the book too. Yeah.
We'll be ready to read it.
Okay, I'll bring it, because I won't have any time to read it. I'm trying to read The Alchemist, and I have a million things to do over the Christmas holidays, but
Okay,
if you want to read the book, you may.
Okay.
So this is the Conjuration of the Seven here. And we're going to go line for line. We'll reveal pretty much everything that Samael left for us, which we'll see isn't a lot, but it's something. So we'll jump right into it. The first line, in the name of Mikael, may Jehovah command thee and drive thee hence, Kavayot. Right, and a lot of these names are Hebraic, but we can transliterate them and pronounce them as in English. So what we see here is Mikael is considered the chief angel above all others and is said to command the army of angels loyal to God. His name from Hebrew translates to who is like God, or the image of God, or the likeness of God, which implies that he is the closest angelic being to God in the divine hierarchy. Mikael is the planetary angel of the sun, which is a symbol of spiritual strength and of the creative forces of God. Mikael also represents an independent part of our own being. Internally, Mikael is the positive force, or fire, that works with the negative force, or water, which is seen as Gabriel, to complete the great work, the alchemical work. So Mikael is that. And there's ancient Kabbalistic texts where they talk about the idea that, and I'll talk about this in my lecture next week, because as I told some of you, this is Ed's lecture. He just couldn't be here tonight, so I'm presenting his lecture for him. But there's ancient Kabbalistic texts. They talk about that angels are principles, or spiritual principles, and that they reside within us, and that to the outer shell, or exoterically, people would see them as external beings, sort of like what we talked about earlier, but that really they're internal parts of ourselves, or like Mikael is the likeness of God, and El, even the word El is God in Hebrew. So we have Mika from the Hebrew Mikino, who is like God, and all the angels, and even some of the ones that were conjuring, like the demons, have El at the end of it. And anytime you see El, you know it's something of God. Samael, Raphael, Gabriel, Orifiel, they're all a principle coming from the prime source. We just have to start thinking more abstractly about them and not as concrete. So, the name Jehovah, or Jehovah, is an anglicized pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton is Latin or Greek word, which means the four-letter word, and the four-letter word it's referring to is Yod-He-Vav-He, which is the holiest name in the Hebrew Scriptures, combined with the vowel points of the Hebrew word Adonai, which means Lord. So in the Old Testament, the name of Jehovah is applied to the host of the cosmos creators, or divine androgynes, right, the Elohim, who created this universe, rather than the original name Yod-Havah. The original name being this Yod-He-Vav-He. In English, we say Jehovah. Yes.
Are you referring to Elohim in the plural because of the Genesis texts?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that the im is a plural suffix in the Hebrew language.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what Samael is saying here is that what we call Jehovah is referring to Yod-He-Vav-He to the Hebrews. The name Jehovah doesn't exist in Hebrew, right? But every time that comes up in the English Bible, Jehovah, it's translating Yod-He-Vav-He as Jehovah. The supreme leader of the positive ray of the moon is Jehovah. So this is seems a little, well, that's less internal, but if we talk about it internally, Jehovah is Kabbalistically read Yod-Havah. It can be Kabbalistically read as Yod-Havah. This means that Yod, the male willpower, the brain, is through chastity dominating Havah, the female power of the Holy Spirit, the sexual organs. Thus the brain is dominating the sex. We're not talking about male and female as gender specific, but as the principles within each one of us, right? So the whole idea of this Jehovah or Yod-Havah is the idea that the brain is overpowering the sex. We're not a slave to our sexual desires, and we have it, in control, kind of thing. We're the master of that, and it's not the master of us. But as we'll see, Havayoth directs the negative ray of the moon, so this is the opposite polarity of the same thing. This demon cultivates the mysteries of black sexual magic. This is from the Perfect Matrimony. In relation with our personal psychology, Havayoth is Kabbalistically read Havayod, right? Which is the exact opposite of Yod-Havah. This means that Hava, the female power of the Holy Spirit, the sexual organs, is through fornication rebelling against the Yod, the male, or the brain. Thus sex is dominating the brain. So it's the exact opposite pole. Where one is chastity, the other is fornication. And that's why in the Conjuration we're using one to conjure the other. We're using Yod-Havah to conjure this name, as seen as negative. The name of God in Hebrew is Yod-He-Vav-He, as we have said. Written in English sometimes as IHVH, and is sometimes read as Yod-Havah. This word read backwards, HVHI, is Havayod, or Havayoth. The reason why there's different spelling is because, like we said before, in all the problems we always have with Hebrew and English, that it's transliterated. So we don't have exact letters for it. Because that would be like Havayod. We don't have a ch, right? And it can be a T, can be pronounced as a T or a TH, depending on the translation of Hebrew. It's just how that language is. So this reverse reading has the opposite meaning of the word Yod-Havah, which is Jehovah, and embodies the opposite principles. So it's sort of making sense. Feel free to ask lots of questions too. It's a little bit of a shorter lecture. And like I said, it was Ed's lecture, and I just got it last minute today because he had to go to his daughter's Christmas recitals. But
What exactly does fornication mean? It doesn't mean all sex, does it?
no, it means the spilling. It means sex. It means spilling the cup, basically.
Oh.
That's fornication.
That's fornication.
That's the definition we apply to in Gnosis, in the Gnostic tradition. That's the idea of fornication. So it doesn't really mean...
That would apply on both gender lines, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. On both which, sorry?
Gender lines?
Yeah, both gender lines. Yeah, exactly. It's basically the orgasm. Yeah. So it does. Nowadays, it has more of a connotation of being promiscuity.
That's what I thought. I was going
Yeah.
to look that up, like
Yeah.
in a dictionary.
And same with when we talk about chastity, we're not talking about not having intercourse. We're talking about having intercourse while retaining the fluids. That's the original idea of chastity in Gnosis. So we have different definitions for it than what have been handed down to this generation now. They've been sort of skewed by time. So this comes from Master Samael's book, and we'll remember that he's talking about in the astral plane now, so it gets more like, you have to remember sort of the astral plane, the plane of magic, the dream interpretation plane. So Master Samael, and accompanying group, a group of other people who were in his group, invoked the demon Havayot in the higher worlds. They found themselves in front of a statue at a crossroad. The statue was very beautiful, like Apollo of the Greeks, but wore a blood-red tunic. Master Samael then said, "In the name of the Tetragrammaton, I conjure you, Havayot." The malignant statue attacks them with hypnotic powers and with words that were disgusting. So astrally, this is the way it's being interpreted. It's being interpreted. Like you can see how we can be hypnotically influenced by our negative sexual desires controlling our higher cognitive abilities. And through that you can start, the disgusting words and all that kind of stuff that comes along with being controlled by your sexual passions as opposed to having them under control. So it's good to interpret it that way also. They used all their spiritual strength to fight the demon, and he retreated into a bar in the astral plane. This is from one of Samael's books. There's more. On another night, Master Samael and his committee invoked Havayot the second time. They submerged themselves into the atomic regions and saw Havayot approaching them. They conjured him, saying, "In the name of Jupiter, father of the gods, I conjure you, Havayot, te vigos koslim." This is that one we were talking about before, the conjuration you can do in the astral plane. So if there's a negative entity, which is basically a reflection of your own psychology in front of you, but if you want to get that under control, you can say, "In the name of Jupiter, father of the gods, I conjure you." And then with your hand on your belly button, te vigos koslim, te vigos koslim, te vigos koslim. And in the astral plane, you can actually physically see that. I guess it'd be astrally see that as a lightning bolt striking this being. And if it's a negative entity, it could, flee before you, or it could change. Or sometimes you could be doing this to a positive entity, or an entity that is neither here nor there, but just some, there's Justin in my bedroom astrally zombieing it up, like, "Oh my God, take me, let's go swim." And just not going to affect him because doesn't know what he's doing. Or maybe he does.
Will it hurt him though? Because astral
No. It will conjure a negative entity. This is the whole idea of what you're doing here. Is now you're having the cognitive power of recognizing and being conscious, and you're conscious that there's a negative entity in this plane of magic, and the way to deal with it in the plane of magic is through this magical kind of invocations and stuff. But really, it's more a recognition of higher consciousness. Now you're getting rid of the negative entities that do attack you in the astral. But at the same time, like we said, you're not going to die in the astral, right? Because you're having dreams. But the idea is to remain conscious. We're already dead in the astral, basically, because we're zombies in the astral. The idea is to gain life in the astral by gaining consciousness. So it's always good to relate it back to the psychology, because you don't want to cultivate too much superstition or think that you don't have control of your own self, because the work is internal and it is up to you. You're not really a victim of the moon's rays or the sun's rays, although they have an influence. It's our job to conquer those rays and become, conscious of them and to rise above them. So the demon was hurt as by a fatal ray. Havayot then asked the men about their wives, so more about the disgusting language and stuff like that. But those demons are. So Samael extended his right hand, and they followed Havayot back to his cavern. Havayot informed them that he had a physical body that resides in Germany. And the demon informed them that he had many disciples, and he taught them the sinister system of Black Tantra. Havayot is the opposite of Jehovah. Jehovah works for the chastity of the world. So the idea here is that you could have a physical body. The idea is like all of our fathers who are in secret have physical bodies. We're just detached from it because we're those bodies. And we're detached from it until we build the higher bodies that they can incarnate to. They have no way of really coming through into the physical world. But apparently this negative entity, this negative spiritual principle, has a physical body residing in Germany, and through that body teaching the system of Black Tantra, which would be the opposite of what we teach here. So for Jehovah, like we said, chastity, Havayot, fornication. That's the idea. And then internally, it's the idea of conquering the idea of chastity and fornication within yourselves. Because all the enemies take place internally first, right? I say that's like one of the biggest weapons of the ego, is projecting an external enemy when one doesn't really exist. All the enemies are internal. So If you see there's an external enemy, it's kind of a perception of an external enemy, and it's a distraction from fighting the real enemy, who is internal and psychological, the ego that bottles up the consciousness. Gotta try and keep that in mind. We're always at war, and it's with ourselves. So, in the name of Gabriel, may Adonai command thee and drive thee hence, Baal. This is the second line there. I'm not sure how to split up on there. But that's the next section we're going to do. So, Gabriel is one of the 7 primary intelligences of our solar system, and his name translates as strong man of God, or the strength of God, or the severity of God, right? The name is actually, as we talked about before, Gebura El, like the Sephiroth Gebura, exact same word, which the Sephiroth means strength or severity, same idea here. Only now it's Gebura El, strength or severity of God. The intimate Gabriel governs our own psychological moon. The psychological moon also has 2 faces, the visible, which is the conscious, and the hidden, the subconscious. The secret defects are found in the hidden part of our own psychological moon. It is obvious that defects, psychic aggregates, and perversities that we do not even remotely suspect exist in the hidden part of our own psychological moon. This is from Lapissa Sophia Unveiled by Samael and War. The idea is, like the actual physical moon has a dark side that we never see, internally our psychology is the exact same way. We talk about it now in modern terms as the conscious and the subconscious. But we have to start to become conscious of the subconscious. That's where all our grossest and largest defects reside. That's why you have to really work at the ego. Like we're saying, the work against the ego is the most important first step on the path. Absolutely it is. So the Hebrew word Adonai translates into English as my Lord or Lord. The Jewish tradition, in the Jewish tradition, whenever they came across the holy name of God, Yod He Vav He we talked about, in Scripture they would never pronounce it. Out of respect, they would never pronounce it out loud, but instead would pronounce the word Adonai in its place. So whenever Yod He Vav He came up, they'd say Adonai, because they weren't allowed to say that name. That's why it's the ineffable name, and it was so holy. They did this to preserve the sacredness of the ineffable name. To pronounce the name Yod He Vav He out loud would be equivalent to taking it in vain because of the holiness that it represents. And even, I'm not sure if you put this in the slides or not, but so what they would do in Jewish scripture is they would put the modern vowel points underneath the Yod He Vav He, the modern vowel points for Adonai, to remind that when they're reading they should read Adonai and not Yod He Vav He. And then when that was translated from German biblical scholars, with the vowel points for Adonai, you get the word Jehovah. That's where it comes from. Because you have the Yod and the vowels for Adonai. If you read that phonetically, it says Yahovah, which isn't the way that Yod He Vav He is pronounced in Jewish scripture, but that's how we get the name Jehovah in English. And that's why it's a J also, because, in German, the Y's and the J's and the Jah, that's right, and all this kind of thing. That's why it's Jehovah, but sometimes Yahovah. Eventually the word Adonai became elevated to such a level of holiness that it is also no longer pronounced. But instead the word Hashem is used, which literally means the name. So now when they see Yod He Vav He in a service, in the synagogue, they'll say Adonai. Outside of the synagogue, they won't even say Adonai because it's so holy now. They say Hashem. Hashem meaning the name. Ha is the, and Shem is the name. And we're going to be talking about this kind of thing particularly in the next lecture, because we have different levels of holiness, basically. And this is how we get it, because they cover the actual name with another name, then through that association, that name becomes holy, and then that one, and that one. So, and then in the higher realms, this is crystallized as degrees of holiness, basically, of the Lord's divine name, or God's divine names. So, Baal is a demon who rules the eastern part of hell and said to be a duke of hell and Satan's main assistant. A lot of this information comes from the old demonology and angelology texts, the Hebraic ones, and a lot of medieval ones also. He is said to rule over 66 legions of infernal spirits and appears in diverse shapes, sometimes as a cat, a toad, or a man, and sometimes as all three at once. He is said to speak hoarsely and has the ability to make one who invokes him invisible. So, we can take that how we want, if you want to be really literal about it. I don't know if there's people out there who's trying to invoke him and be invisible in the physical plane. To me, maybe that's the would be the lowest grasping of concepts. Yes?
Is the same Baal as Baal or Baal?
I believe it is. It's like the Baal worship. The idea in the old scripture is just a little confusing because Baal means master.
And it's used in several different belief systems.
Sure it is. Same with like the name for God is El, or in say Arabic, Allah. They're kind of from the similar roots, right? And then when we get to English is where we get transliterations and we get these different ideas that don't really get the idea across. So as we know from looking at the word, say Yod He Val He, we have a masculine and a feminine principle combined into one, and then so it has a bigger connotation than just the word Jehovah, which to most maybe Western Christians just means is like a synonym for God with no implication of gender or plurality either. But like in Hebrew, if you say like Baal Hasulam, it's just like that's the guy's name, master of the ladder. It can be positive or negative. But they always called Baal worship. Every other nation who wasn't the nation of Israel who worshipped something else, where they worship a different master, the master was Baal. So even Baal worship could be different entities that they were worshiping. So one night in the astral body, Master Samael and his committee invoked the demon Baal. Baal was a tenebrous king who lived in a cavern in the Gobi Desert. There he instructed his disciples. He taught the black magic of the sublunar spheres. So all these guys are working against us with this black magic stuff. He was dressed in the robe of a black magician. We did not make much friendship with him. His character was unapproachable. This is from Samael and what he saw in the astral when they invoked it. Because they went line by line in the astral plane and invoked these things. Yes?
Why are they invoking these demons? Like, what is the purpose?
Their idea, what they were trying to do is to understand what this entity was. And his idea, because these conjurations come down from a long line. I've seen them written in the early 1700s. And I think they were trying to understand line by line what it meant and what these demons were. You had, like the idea of like knowing what you're fighting against. And once you could recognize this external demon in the astral plane, you could begin to recognize it within yourself and start fighting it in yourself where the battle really takes place. Is the idea of what they were doing. So Adonai, the son of light and happiness, was the opposite. So again, we have the whole idea between these seven is the polarity, different degrees. Yes?
The degrees of separation are the separation from the God Adonai or Elohim or etc.
Well,
etc.
Yeah, the idea here is
Because
that...
you said the juxtaposition of the last character was Jehovah, or
yeah,
the other
Havayot
was
and Jehovah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Now Adonai and Baal are two opposite extremes of one principle.
Okay.
That's why, like with Jehovah, it was chastity and fornication. That's basically, you call that sex, right? The one principle. So they are intimately related that way, just like the seven doubles were related to each other.
And the way the word's set up implies how it means.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But these are also open for some interpretation and independent research. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of information left on these particular subjects, but they're important. So these two opposites of philosophy were intimately related to the moon's rays. And they relate each one of these to a planetary body also. So, like in the physical, it can be seen as the moon. That's why they always have these vice regions, like Samael is the region of Mars. And Mars has all these attributes of war. I think we'll get into all that stuff, actually. But they're always related to physical body, like a planetary body, the seven major ones, and then internally, psychologically, and astrally, that kind of thing. So in the name of Raphael, be gone before Eliel, Sam Gabriel. That's the next chunk we're going to tackle here. Raphael is one of the seven primary intelligences of our solar system. And his name translates as God heals, or the healing of God. Right, Rapha and El. Raphael is a planetary angel of Mercury. He is related to the element of air and to the metal Mercury. Raphael is considered to be the angel of healing and is therefore petitioned by the faithful members of various religions to grant them remedies and cure them from any number of ailments. So the idea too, like if we step back macrocosmically and really check out what's going on here, is that Raphael is this healing principle from the one source of God, and we always depict it like this, or in the astral plane it can appear as something like this. But the idea is that how at the top of the Sephiroth tree we are all one. So all these separate entities are just specific jobs coming from what we call God, or the Ein Sof, the absolute abstract. And that's why they also say one angel can have one job, and two angels can't have the same job. So if one angel had one job, that'd be two principles. And if two principles have the same job, it'd be one principle. They'd be the same thing, like love. Love doesn't have the job of love and truth. That's two different principles, is the idea. If we start looking at it higher like that. But it does get a little more abstract when we start looking at it as principles. So when we look at it like this, and in the astral, it's more concrete because it's easier for us to understand, because it's closer to the realm of the physical than, say, the Ein Sof or the absolute abstract is. So this is from the some apocryphal Judaic works. Raphael cured Tobias, is from an ancient text called the Book of Tobias. Cured Tobias of blindness by using the gallbladder of a fish. Later he drove away a demon of lust by burning the heart and liver of the same fish. This is why he is usually depicted in art as carrying or standing on a fish. This is more a little bit like historical. This is why Raphael, you always see an angel, sometimes he's standing on a fish, sometimes he's holding a fish. It's from these ancient traditional stories that say that using the body parts of this fish, he would heal people. Now, obviously it's more important for us, the internal aspects of this, but this is just where this kind of artwork comes from. The idea that they're healing people using a fish. So, it is difficult to find exact meanings for some of the names in the Conjuration. This is most likely due to the fact that the Conjuration of the Seven is very old and has been translated, and in some cases transliterated, from a number of languages. Right? I think it was first written down maybe by Eliphas Levi, who translated it from Hebrew into French, and then from French they went to Spanish through Samuel, and from Spanish, English. So you can see there's a lot of translations. Right? It's a lot of translation. So Eliel is the positive, and Sam Gabriel is the negative. They're the two opposites of the same. They're two different polarities of the same unity, basically. The opposite beings are principles that belong to the mental world, meaning that, well, there are many dangers in the mental world, for the ego is very strong here. Like, yes, I am. Oh, right, sorry, yeah.
I'm lost anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very complicated. Like going home.
Yeah. No, don't go home. Don't go home.
I hate coming late.
This is basically to give you an idea of where all these words come from. The main idea for doing this is just trying to explain why we do this. And why we're doing this is so that we can kind of, the idea of the conjurations is to cast out the negative polarities or entities within us internally. Because once you go on the astral plane, what's internal becomes external, and it feels like maybe there's demons around you and everything. Meanwhile, this is a projection of your own internal egos. In the astral plane, you think of an ego, that ego's there, right? So they're internal representations. So we want to present this, I guess there is a lot of information here, but we didn't want you to think that you're just doing this dogmatically, or that we just say these words and everything will be good for no reason. We wanted to go a little bit behind why we say these words, and the idea behind doing the conjurations, and the idea behind doing the invocations. They do have effects. The most important thing you can do is to do them and notice their effects. I mean, I was in Phase C once, and I remember I wasn't overly interested in conjurations and invocations because I came from Roman Catholicism, which I found really dogmatic, and I thought I don't really want to trade one dogma for another one. And then I had experiences that were getting pretty negative, in like whether it be night terrors or nightmares and these bad dreams and all kinds of things. And one night I woke up out of fear and I did the conjurations, and it was peaceful. I didn't have any more of these nightmares or bad dreams. And I found even like when you're doing certain practices, like say alchemical practices, these help too with when you're sleeping and unconscious in the astral, is when you have a chance to perhaps fall because you're not as conscious as you are in the physical. This is kind of cleansing the internal aspects of you, so and protecting you against your own negative side. Yes?
So would it help to do the conjuration of the 4 or the 7, whatever, in your bedroom before you go to bed?
Absolutely. I do it every night. You know, I remember the strongest one was, I was like, I'm not doing it. I think I was, yeah, anyways. I was like, I wasn't going to do it. I think I'd been drinking that night or something like that. And so I'm just going to bed. I'm tired. It's late. And I went to sleep. And then as soon as I closed my eyes, I could still vividly see it was this grass hill with a cellar door open. And I was being drawn into it. And every inch of my being did not want to go in there. Just like one of those dreams you have. I can't explain why. I don't know what was down there. I just felt the terror and not wanting to go down there. Internally, I think it was into my own subferior regions of my own subconscious. So I woke myself up just out of fear, and I did them. And I thought, you know, there is something to this. There is something to this. And when I first started to try and think about this stuff a lot, I'd be like, well, maybe it's a placebo effect. And I said, well, a placebo effect is an effect. People always overlook that. You give them sugar pills and tell them it heals them, then they're healed. That's an effect of the mind. I'm not saying they are like a placebo effect. It took me a long time to rationalize and understand these because I'm not at this super high mastery level. I had to really understand, why am I doing these? Why am I spinning in a circle and doing the star and everything? And I really want to see it work. Yes.
So once you start doing these every night, you're going to have to keep doing them, right?
I mean, it's your choice. It's 100% your
Or have a
choice.
nightmare.
Because like I'm not really having nightmares
Sure.
that I know of right now, but I guess the more you progress, the more you remember your dreams.
Absolutely. These things help with that. They help with remembering the dreams. They help with having
Okay.
positive experiences in the astral. That's the idea.
Okay.
So they help. I would recommend doing them every night, but I'm not going to say, go home and do these every night or kick me out of here. You know, it's not really like that.
Do you do one or the other, or do you do them both? Conjuration
I
of
do all
4.
3 of them.
So there's 4, 7, and there's...
And the Invocation of Solomon, which we'll be doing next week.
Oh, you do all those.
Uh,
How long does that all take?
Well, I mean, I have them memorized by now, so it's
Wow, you've
10 minutes
this
tops.
whole paper?
but yeah, I've been doing it for a while, so you got
A lot of
time.
years.
Yeah, it's not like you have to memorize it
So
overnight or
is
anything.
do you have these online?
Yeah,
So
it'll be online.
And there's an audio?
There's an audio with each
Oh,
one
good,
too.
because I'm going to have to learn
That's the hardest part. What I did with the pronunciations is I listened to the audio and I just wrote it out how I think it should be spelled. Right?
That's a good way.
Like how it sounded when I think it's Wolfgang who's reading it out on the audio.
Oh, okay.
So I just write it out and then I'd learn a little bit at a part, at a time. Being a Freemason also, I have a lot of memory work, so it's been easier for me. So, but I mean, that's really neither here nor there. But
Okay.
even if you don't have to memorize it, you could read it off your sheet.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
the idea is to do it. The idea is like this is the
Just
same
get
as sort of praying, but
Yes, like
but
prayers.
but we have a little more
After
insight
you'll have
into
them memorized.
what we're doing with it. Like a prayer is the same thing. You're putting your faith in something higher or something maybe hidden. We're doing sort of the same thing, but we're being really specific with it. These different entities or beings, which are in reality different principles that come from the higher source. So I mean, that answered the question. So while investigating this line in the higher worlds, Samael and his group entered a luminous temple with elders inside. They were dressed in the robes of masters, they wore sandals and spoke of sublime things. The investigators believed that they were in a temple of white magic before a group of holy masters. The Grand Master began delicately discussing the topic of sex. And we don't go into all of it here, but they started talking and pushing the idea of spilling a cup as being a really positive spiritual thing to do. So once one of the investigators stood up and said, "Long live the Christ," down with Jave, which is a negative principle. Christ and Jave are the two opposite, light and darkness, white and black magic. So we know like the power of the Christ is through transmuting the sexual energies, and Yahweh or Jave would be the exact opposite of that. When they heard this, in this temple, the holy, now we're saying in quotations because we realized they weren't holy entities, the holy face of that venerable elder that spoke suddenly changed color completely, became angry, and transformed itself. Those holy elders unmasked themselves. They were true princes of darkness, terrible black magicians of the world of the cosmic mind. So So the idea there too is we can see this internally, and we can see this externally in the physical. Even when we hear people talking about things, a lot of times we'll see, like with the Black Lodge, what we call the Black Lodge, maybe through ignorance or maybe through intention, we'll mix a lot of truth in and then slowly pepper it with a lot of negative things. Like, I don't want to pick on any one system or anything. There's that one in the belief that Ramtha, this church of Ramtha, which is this woman who apparently channels as being Ramtha. It has a lot of beautiful messages about love and divinity, and that we are spiritual beings and everything. And it says, know that you're perfect. I see you perfect already, you don't have to work on yourselves, kind of thing. So there's all these beautiful messages in the idea that you don't have to do any work. We're already holy beings, which in this system would seem as a really negative thing, because they're telling people who are essence wrapped in ego that they don't have to do any work. And as we've seen, well, as you all know now, from Phase C, that there is a lot of work on this path to incarnate the soul and create the higher bodies and everything. Sometimes it would be a nicer idea that you didn't have to, and if that's the path you choose, that's your choice for sure. But the idea of this path is that it's a lot of work. There is a lot of work you have to do on yourself. So if we were already divine, then there would be no wars, there would be no greed or hate, right? People would be living by these divine principles, which we are not seeing in the physical world. So, I mean, maybe I shouldn't call them systems like that by name, because everybody likes different things. But that was just an example. So the next chunk we're going to do is by Samael Sabaoth, and in the name of Elohim Gibor, get the hens and Dramalek.
How do you say that? Sabaoth?
Sabaoth.
Sabaoth.
Yeah, Sabaoth.
Sabaoth. And Elohim Gibor.
Elohim Gibor. Yeah.
Andramelech.
And Dramalek. Yeah.
Andramelech.
Yeah. And like we said, when you go online, there'll be an audio version of all of this too. So, like I said, the best idea is to write it how you think it should be spelled, the way that Wolfgang's pronouncing it is the best. I think personally there is a little bit of give. I don't think it's as like indoctrinated that you have to say the name right or else you're going to invoke the wrong thing, because a lot of this is Hebrew. We're not saying the Hebrew, right? Like the word Sabaoth is in Hebrew Sabaoth. We don't have a sound, a T and a Z combination sound. So if you wanted to say it here, it would be Sabaoth. But we say it in English, Sabaoth. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the principle that we're invoking, so we don't have to get hung up too much on just the names. You don't want to, mix up this one with this one and conjure this guy with that guy. That'd be the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. But if you say Andramelech or Andramalek, personally, I feel
Andramelech is the bad guy.
Yeah, we're always using the good guy
At the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning, to conjure the bad guy. The idea of the conjuring is that we're casting out the negative. We're using the positive polarity to cast out the negative polarity, whether it be around us or, more importantly, within us internally, before we want to do meditative practices or alchemical practices, or just before we want to go to sleep and have some peace of mind. So, Samael is one of the 7 primary intelligences of our solar system, and his name translates as the bitter beverage of God, or the poison of God, and can equally be translated as the perfume of God, or the medicine of God. So even that name itself has 2 polarities. Samael is the planetary angel of Mars, and he has been known by many names throughout history, but he is perhaps best known as Ares, Mars, the god of war. As the angel of death, or god of war, traditionally Samael has been viewed as the administrator of God's judgment, and because of his controversial role, he has sometimes been labeled a demon or seen as negative. But it's the angel of death, the judgment of God, and he's related to war. And as we know from Master Samael's teachings, the war is the war on the ego. This is the war that he's helping us in now. So Sabaoth, this word Sabaoth, it means hosts, literally, or which is like armies. Armies. It refers to the multitude in God's service, the hosts. So you see, in English we see that sometimes. You see Lord of Hosts. That would be translated from the Hebrew Yod-Heh Vav-Heh Sabaoth, this word. This just means there's a nice picture depicting it, yeah. Good job, Ed. So Elohim Gibor translates to English as a statement that roughly means the male and female divinities are mighty, right? Elohim being the plural of El, God. Gibor which is from the Gabur, the Sifroth Gabur, which means strength or might. So that's why they say male and female divinities, because it's like, or like the gods are strong. Elohim translates to gods. Gabur is taken from the word Gabura, which means severity, power, or strength. The combination of Samael Sabaoth, the angel of God's judgment, and the armies in God's service, with Elohim Gabur, the mighty gods, informs us of how strong this line of the conjuration is, as it is calling upon an immense number of God's forces of spiritual strength. So this is a really important line. We're calling in a lot of positive vibes here. This is from the Pista Sophia unveiled by Samael. Bodhisattva. Let it be understood that a bodhisattva is a seed, a germ, with the possibility of transcendental divine development by means of pressure coming from the height. So it seems, maybe it seems a little bit cryptic. The idea is that we're all bodhisattvas, basically all fallen right now because we don't have our higher beings incarnated. But the pressure from on height, from the pressure that develops us from the height, is the internal workings of your inner being. They're pushing us, the monad, the intimus, the Father who's in secret, your Divine Mother. If you're on the spiritual path, it's because you're getting a push from these forces. So you don't have to really think of it as you're going it alone. You're doing your part down here because they're doing their part up there, and hopefully they're going to connect. That's the whole plan. Here's a picture. Okay, but Andremelech. I think we spelled it wrong. Andremelech was an idol in the shape of a mule. This is to be concluded from his name, which is compounded of to carry and a king. Still another explanation of the name ascribed to the god, the form of a peacock, and derives the name from Adair, magnificent, and Melech, king. So it looks like that's kind of, Ed's doing some big time research back there to tell us what this name means. So we'll have to thank him next time we see him for that one. That's informative. Master Samael and committee invoked Andremelech in a subterranean cavern in the astral plane. The plane of magic, right? The plane of symbology and the plane of allegory. A gigantic, black, and horrible personage appeared. They made use of the conjuration of Jupiter as before, and the demon submitted to them. That was the Te Vigo Sko Slim. That's the conjuration. Now you'll have it, because it'll be in here. So I remember someone was looking for it, I think. I forget who it was. Someone asked me about it before.
Can I ask, what dimension is the astral?
The astral is in the 5th dimension.
Oh, like the same like the mental?
Yeah, the mental and the astral are in the same dimension.
So
They're two separate planes of one dimension.
So the astral is the emotional part?
The emotional, exactly, yeah. The emotional passions, desires. The mental is the intellectual, obviously. You can see it. In this picture, we showed you have a dimension 1, 2, 3, dimension 4, dimension 5 with the astral and the mental. Depicted there. Okay. On another night, Master Samael and his committee again invoked Andremelech. A giant appeared at the door's threshold wearing a black robe and carrying a scepter of command in his right hand. The members were shaking, and one fled at the sight of Andremelech's eyes. However, Andremelech, full of great decency and delicate manners, stretched out his hand and courteously greeted each of the brothers and sisters, depending on who was there. He sat down and gave them helpful advice. The scepter and chain he wore were from the White Lodge. So in this story, this one's a little confusing, but he explains it. After further investigation, the being that they met on the second night was Andremelech, the master of the White Lodge. The master sent his human soul into the world to reincarnate. So the human soul, remember, being at the level of Tiferet, above that divine soul, above that intimus. His human soul fell and dedicated itself to black magic. Therefore, that man, the human soul that was sent here, transformed himself into a demon. Kind of awoken in darkness, like the idea of the Black Tantra and the creation of the solar bodies without the elimination of the ego, is to awaken in darkness. When the investigator invokes Andremelech in the astral, either Andremelech the demon or Andremelech the grand spiritual master can appear. So I don't know. I've never attempted this kind of thing. But if I did, I'd just start hitting them up with the Te Vigo Sko Slim and see who we got. That'd be one of the good ideas. right? So this is the idea where we get into some of the more maybe complexities of the Gnostic system. The idea of all of our fathers who are in secret are higher spiritual beings in the White Lodge. We're not connected to them. We could awaken in darkness by not eliminating the ego and intentionally practicing Black Tantra, there is a practice for it. They speak about it in the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi Library. Not that I recommend, practicing it, obviously, but we can do that, and then you're going to have what they call a Hannes Musin, Wolfgang says, and that's a double polarity entity who has a positive because the father is always positive, and a negative because the person who came here awoken in darkness and now has created a negative side of that entity. And that's what happened with this Andremelech. So it is a little confusing, for sure. But I mean, it's not the most important thing to take away from this lecture, obviously. The next line, we can answer all questions we have. We can talk this thing out if you guys want. But so by Zachariel and Sashel Melech, be obedient unto Elavah, son of Gabriel. That's the next line we're going to talk about. Zachariel is one of the 7 primary intelligences of our solar system, and his name translates as the righteousness of God. He is a planetary angel of Jupiter. Zachariel is an angel of mercy, benevolence, and freedom, and the patron angel of all who forgive. So Zachariel, is like that principle of forgiveness and mercy. Sashiel is sometimes considered as another name for Zachariel and means the covering of God. So it have kind of the connotation of the merciful covering of God kind of thing. However, Zachariel is related to the angelic order of the Hashmalim. We're going to be talking about them in the Invocation of Solomon, which are found in the 4th Sephiroth, which is Hesed, and Sashiel is related to the angelic order of the Cherubim, which are found in the 9th Sephiroth of Yesod. So the idea is that it's like the same principle in a varying degrees. That's why it's in 2 different Sephiroth. So obviously the one in Hesed would be a more divine crystallization of this force, and the one in Yesod would be less intense, but still along the same lines, same spiritual principle. Therefore, these 2 titles or names, there you go, he said it right there, represent the same principle or force, but at varying degrees. And it's both a positive. It's a positive force in varying degrees. Elva and Sana Gabriel, are both related to the planet Jupiter, but represent its 2 opposite forces. Elva is the embodiment of the positive ray of Jupiter's influence and an angel of love, altruism, charity, chastity, and sanctity. Sana Gabriel is the embodiment of the negative ray of Jupiter's influence, right? And Jupiter, the principle of Jupiter is related to the law, like the divine law. So, whereas, we have, which guys? Elva is like the positive idea of the law, or following the obeying of the law. Sana Gabriel would be the opposite of that, not obeying the law. The Jupiterian vibration is the force which grants power to the kings and hierarchs of diverse religions. The planet Jupiter is extraordinary, mystical, regal, and sublime. This is the positive ray of Jupiter. On the other hand, its opposite is the force of the materialistic atheist, enemies of the eternal. The blasphemers, those who hate divinity, and the heretics, those who cultivate the dogma of separatism. So we can see how those 2 principles would exist within ourselves internally. And the idea of invoking the positive one to conjure out the negative one is the idea of us invoking within ourselves the power of, not even so much like religious as dogmatic, but spiritual reverence. And by casting out our own type of heretical ideas of we should all be separated and everybody's different, right? Which doesn't really, that kind of thing doesn't sit well with any monotheistic faith in my mind. If you have a monotheistic faith, like the Abrahamic faiths, then there's one God, then there's one God. You can't say there's one God, but the Jews have a different one, but we have the right one, and these guys have a different one. There's one God. Yes?
Do you know what picture that is?
No, like I said, this is my brother's.
Gustav Dor, and it's
Okay.
the fall of Lucifer.
The Fall of Lucifer. Okay. Gustav Dor, so that'd be from Paradise Lost, is that the pictures of?
I think so. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Very cool. So the Fall of Lucifer, the bringer of light.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost, yeah.
The same group of.
Right, yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I know Ed uses a lot of those paintings. So masters, I think, were they engravings or paintings? I can't remember.
I think they were engravings.
I think they are too. You're right, yeah. So Master Samael and committee invoked Santa Gabriel in the internal worlds. They heard the footsteps of claws or nails coming towards them and then saw a terrible being. They saw his tremendously horrible face. That diabolical beast's terrible aspect surprised them so much that they returned to their physical bodies instantaneously. So they kind of wigged out on this one. Yeah, exactly. They kind of, oh man, we have to regroup on this one, guys. So the next time, they cowboyed up, and then the next time they invoked Santa Gabriel, he appeared in human form as a banker and wanted to talk to them about money. He offered them prize-winning lottery numbers, according to him, so that they could buy the winning ticket. With these temptations, he tried to attract them to his sphere of tenebrous influence, that sphere of materialism, being attached to material. The idea we've talked before that money is neutral, it's neither good nor bad. But here he's trying to influence them in negative. Take the money, just live easy, don't worry about all this kind of invoking me and this weird stuff. Just go buy a yacht. It'll be fun. Okay. So we can see that within ourselves also. Yes.
Well, what would the harm be in taking those numbers? I mean, it's what you do with the money.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So?
The idea in this one is that
You failed.
we can have a bigger center for sure.
I would take it.
Yeah. The idea with this one in this book, he's just really what Ed's done here is he's really gotten down to point form. There's a lot more information, but the idea was that they would
No, I was always saying with those lottery winners, sometimes you think, oh well, they didn't, build a school or dig a well or something. They bought themselves a yacht. But that created jobs, thousands of people. Somebody has to buy those yachts, and somebody made the Mercedes, and somebody, built their home. So they've actually given back almost in this, because even though you're trying to be, no,
I'm with you. That's the way our society is made up. You can argue that the way our society is made up is corrupt, and the distribution of wealth and all that kind of stuff. But to go back and answer that is that in this story they were offered these numbers in this lottery in lieu of spiritual training or spiritual lessons. You can receive, you can take your payment. Maybe if you have dharma, positive, you can take it physically, or you can take it spiritually. Like maybe you're really good in one life, so the next life you get to be king.
It's kind of a trade-off. Give you these numbers, but stop studying this spiritual
Exactly.
stuff.
He was doing it as a way to veer him off the path of spirituality towards the path of materiality. Yes.
Why would he want to make them go off the path?
He would want to because an external entity, which is also an internal entity we have, this is the part of ourselves that wants to pull down. We have two beings within us, the ego and the material and the spiritual. So we can see that within us. We'll be you know what, I would love to do all this work, but maybe I should just stick to working at the garage and live my life already. It's easier that way. That could be an idea of this influence of this demon, right?
I'm sure that comes up.
The demons are more closely related to egos. And the egos are internal, but they're also universal. We will all have the same types of egos, right? We all have the egos of lust, the 7 basic, greed, gluttony, all these things, we have them within us. That's why it can be generalized for all of us, too. They manifest themselves in different ways through each individual, but the same ones exist in all of us because they're these universal principles. The lower degree of this universal principle that comes from the higher spiritual realms. Yeah. I think we're getting through it. So here's a big chunk. By the divine and human name of Shaddai, and by the sign of the pentagram which I hold in my right hand, in the name of the angel Anael, and by the power of Adam and Eve, who are Yod Hava, be gone Lilith, let us rest in peace, Nahama.
Be gone Lilith. So Lilith is a bad one too.
Lilith is a negative energy, yes.
Oh,
yeah, for sure. It's been sort of switched around in our society now with attached to the feminist movement a little bit, with the Lilith fairs and all of that kind of thing. But
how do you say the last one?
Nahama. Yeah, Nahama. They're sort of really similar. We'll get into.
And it's Yod Hava.
Yod Hava. Yod Hava or Yod Chava, but probably Yod Hava will do for sure. Yeah. So, Shaddai is one of the Hebrew names of God and translates as Almighty, like El Shaddai, or God on high, or God Almighty. It is possible, however, that the original significance was that of overmastering or overpowering strength. So the idea of the overpowering strength of God, who is from on high, the Almighty. The symbolism of the pentagram is represented by the hand because the 5 fingers are emblematic of the 5 points of the pentagram. And the idea of it being in the right hand is the idea of it being used positively, as opposed to, say, the left hand would be the inverted pentagram. What happened there? Oh, I see what's going on here. He's just giving it to us all at once. That's cool. So, Anael is one of the 7 primary intelligences of our solar system, and his name translates as the joy of God, the grace of God, and he is associated with the planet Venus. Anael is considered the angel of love and has dominion over the air. Adam and Eve, when represented as Yod Hava, is a symbol of the perfected being, man as the image of God, the masculine and feminine force in equilibrium and harmony. That's why the Yod Hava is basically like sort of represents the Elohim, the plural male-female androgynous being. The use of Anael alongside Adam Yod Hava tells us that the negative force in this line is being conjured by the forces that represent love and sexuality in their purest forms. Because, as we said, Anael being the angel of love, Yod Hava being the combined male and female principles as the sexual purity, basically. So, Lilith and Nahama are 2 terrible and perverse demons. These 2 demons govern the spheres of the abyss. Lilith translates as female night spirit demon. Lilith is also called the mother of abortions. She is the mother of demons, and her offspring have had many names but are commonly known as the succubus and the incubus, which prey on sleeping men and women in order to fornicate with them and cause them to fall. The idea of nocturnal emissions. This is why, maybe for men more particular, or we'll say adolescent boys, it's always brought on by a dream or something you can always see, but sometimes we'll think the latter is affecting the former, but in reality it's this dream or this thought that's causing this thing, and this thought is this idea of this entity of Lilith that's causing them to fall. Lilith is considered the demon of fornicators, sexual perversity, and crimes against nature. Lilith represents the negative ray of Venus, right? Where Anael was the positive ray. The origin of fornication is in Lilith. The origin of separate individuality is in Lilith. And the origin of the eye is in the black moon of Lilith. So, yes.
Is the word abortion applied to how you're not actually giving birth to something, you're just doing it?
That's how I would interpret it.
Okay.
Not of like the physical practice of abortion, but the fact that you're wasting the seeds of life or the powers of life for the female and not using it for procreation of life, but for the fulfilling of your own internal desires. So it's more of a selfish thing. Whereas the transmutation is an unselfish thing because it's for the Father, right, the Divine Mother. So Lilith has more of a positive connotation in our society today just because of these Lilith fairs. But they took this old Hebraic Mishnah story about Lilith being the first wife of Adam, that she was banned and that's not cool, she's a feminist and we should follow her, yeah.
But women aren't really spilling any seeds or anything,
No,
so it's not the same as men.
It's
so
not the same exactly in that way, but it's the energies too, that creative energy.
Yeah.
The idea of this losing of the creative energy and what it does to the body and everything. But yeah, so when they have these little affairs and stuff, you gotta be like, I don't know. They're latching onto one aspect of that story and not the other aspect, that she was the first wife, not fit for Adam because she was the wife of fornication and she was this temptress demon, always portrayed as evil, but then when they had a little affair, like, no, it's not cool. You gotta see she's alright. But, I mean, you can't really pick and choose, I guess, what I'm trying to say, the story. The whole story is, obviously, she's shown in a negative light. So, Nahama is a symbol in Kabbalah related to lust, seduction, and the infernal worlds. Nahama is the faithful and mortal beauty. When a man is unfaithful to his wife and dedicates himself to lustful passions, God takes away his wife to throw him into the arms of Nahama. This is kind of like a poetic interpretation of these principles. This queen of the infernals knows how to seduce him with all the enchantments of virginity and love. She leads astray the hearts of fathers, pushing them to abandon their children. She makes married people dream of other lovers, and the men consecrated to God to dream of marriage. He took this from a demonology book, I believe. And Nahama's fatal beauty and Lilith's sexual crimes are the antithesis of the perfect marriage, the exact opposite. So whereas Lilith is the actual, we'll say fornication, act of fornication, Nahama is a little more subtle, so that much, more evil, because she portrays, or like this feeling is the idea of chastity and virginity and beauty and everything, but at the end still coming to the same ends as with Lilith.
She's more deceitful.
More deceitful, exactly. And it makes you think you're doing something good. And it's not so much that we can view it as a she and she's leading men astray, but it's that principle within us that will lead us astray. Say if you're married and be like, I bet this other girl, she's really beautiful and she'll probably be, really nice and we'll have a happy life and everything. Then you leave your wife and you turn out falling into the spilling of the seeds and all kinds of stuff, and it's not how you imagined it, because it never is, right? This is this principle in action.
But that also goes for women.
Goes for women, exactly. That's why I'm saying we shouldn't view it as just like a she leading men astray, because it's the principle within us. Principle within a woman says,
no sex.
Yeah. It's like,
Gender, I should say.
my husband's always leaving the toilet seat up. I'm going to leave him for another guy. He's always going to put the toilet seat down. It's going to be beautiful. And then guess what?
Boring.
Seats up. Yeah, no good. So
My husband's so boring. He's a couch potato.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'll go out to the bar and see what I can pick up.
He doesn't understand me. Guess what? No one understands you because no one understands themselves. So, there we go. So Master Samael and committee invoked the demon of Lilith, the demon Lilith, and the angel Anael simultaneously. The angel Anael came at our call in the form of a beautiful boy who had a luminous appearance. A few minutes later, another boy of the exact size of Anael entered the room. This boy had a malignant and perverse appearance. These two opposites of Venus sat face to face, Anael and Lilith, love and counter-love. Lilith did not dare look at Anael's severe, radiant, and luminous face. So we can kind of grasp from this, like, this is classic allegory. When we understand the principles that are happening here, we can understand what's going on here. So, like we said, Anael is the positive force, Lilith is the opposite force. That's why they're twins, because they're opposite polarities of the same exact force, this love, counter-love, singularity, and there are varying degrees of it, varying poles to be exact. And one could not look at the other, I think, obviously, because that relates to us how one is below the other one, or ashamed because it knows that the higher one is the one that we should be following. So we can internalize it as that also.
Doesn't it also mean that darkness can't stand the brightness because they have turned away from the light?
Sure.
So they can't stand to see the light?
Absolutely. And then the idea of darkness and light also relates to truth.
Mm-hmm.
Truth is always related to light, so it could be the idea that they can't take the light. They're far from the truth. They're in darkness, they're blind, they don't see the reality of the light.
Yeah.
So, we can take it that way. In the astral plane, it would appear just like this. You would see it, yeah.
So could Anael be the same as Uriel?
That's who?
Or is
Uriel, I think, is closely related, and I think he talks about it next. But I'm not really sure. Like I said, I didn't do the research on this lecture. But I did obviously take it in phase C and everything. But Uriel is coming up, I think. By the Holy Elohim, and by the names of the genie Cashiel, Sahaltiel, Aphael, and Zorahiel, at the command of Orithiel, begone Moloch, we deny thee our children to devour. Uriel, Anael and Uriel. I think Anael and Uriel are the same, but it's just two different pronunciations or two different translations, because a lot of the translations, I'm not 100% sure, I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it.
Because a lot of times when an angel has one name in one language, it has a different name in a different language, but it's the same exact principle, right? Could be the same thing like that.
So Anael and Uriel could be the same?
Could be the same. I'm not sure if he
Could
has
be the
anything.
same because Uriel is the ruler of Jupiter, of Venus, right?
And it could just be our interpretation of what they're called. So just like, like we said, like an apple and a tear, like a potato and a pomme de terre, the same thing with two different languages. One's not right or wrong. Yes.
Now, all the angels are represented as astral bodies, physical, like planetary bodies. Do they coincide with astrological symbols?
I believe they
Like
do.
when you talk about twins and things like that, it just sounds slightly.
That sound like Gemini and stuff like that.
And the fish.
The fish, Pisces, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it definitely could, because they are related. like in the Kabbalistic study, when we saw the three primary forces, then the 7 doubles represent these 7 planets, and 12 elementals were the 12 signs of the zodiac, and they.
And houses of planets can affect all the stars
Yeah.
can affect the planets themselves.
And I've read in old most of the stuff I'm coming to is from the old Kabbalistic research stuff, not necessarily from what I've read in Gnosticism. But the idea is that this principle will come through from its source and come through a planet and act on like a lower vibration, then come through a astrological sign on a lower vibration, and finally manifest itself through humanity. I'm not sure if he talks about it in this lecture or not, but he may. So maybe we'll go on and go up. So I read this one, yeah. By the Holy Elohim, by the names of the Genie Kashiel, Saltiel, Aphael, and Zorahel, at the command of Raphael, begone Moloch, we deny thee our children to devour. This is the last line, I think, the last section. So, Raphael is one of the primary intelligences of our solar system and translates as the face of God. Raphael is the planetary angel of Saturn and is associated with steadfastness, consistency, firm loyalty, and integrity. Saturn is also related, remember, with death. Saturn is the law of death, that kind of thing. So it can be used for the death of the ego or the death of the physical body. In this line of the Conjuration, we see the names of 6 positive deities being invoked to conjure the name of 1 negative entity. So right off the bat, we know this is a big one. So we've got all these positive forces for 1 negative force. Kashiel is the angel of temperance associated with Saturn, the angel of death for kings and other important people. So it's related to Saturn that way. Sahaltiel literally translates as the prayer of God. Aphael is appointed over the spirits of the wicked in order to cast them down to be punished in the fire. So this is still related with the death. Zahariel is translated as God's command and is one of the primary angels who lead souls to judgment. Right? So all these angels have different jobs, but within the sphere of Jupiter, within the idea of death, the sphere of death.
Oh,
So they're all related that way
to
to Jupiter, yeah, to Jupiter.
Jupiter or Saturn?
Saturn. Sorry, I meant Saturn. I was saying that. Sorry about Jupiter. I had Jupiter on the brain. Jupiter was the law. Saturn. Saturn is death. That's why Saturn is usually depicted as an angel with a sickle. Sometimes you'll see, like if you see Masonic art, sometimes they'll have the angel with the sickle braiding the woman's hair at a broken column. So it's the idea that your time is limited before you're going to die. Everyone is going to die, so you have to do the work while the light. You have to make hay while the sun shines, the idea. Make hay while the sun shines, so you have a small amount of time to do the work. So, Moloch is one of 2 chief demons of revolt and anarchy, the other one being Satan. Satan comes from the Hebrew ha-satan, which means literally the adversary. So ancient tradition says Moloch was an iron bowl that was heated red hot and children were thrown to its belly. Moloch is associated with the horrible practice of human sacrifice, and Moloch is a strong representation of false idol worship. Internally, we could take it internally also, and the idea of the sacrificing of the baby. Internally, what would you have ideas what that would represent within us? What baby would we be sacrificing to this horrible being? Could be, the soul or the higher being. You're sacrificing this higher being for this, iron bowl, which is this really material kind of false idol worship. So the idea of losing our souls by coming off the path to follow anything else.
Our virtues. Our virtues.
Yeah, our virtues, yeah. All this
Maybe
kind of
that's
sacrifice.
related to the children, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of times, even in the Gnostic Gospels, and we're translating the Christian Gospels from the Gnostic Gospels, the idea of children didn't always mean literal children. It meant people who were new on the path, or not very far along the path. So where it's explained more in the Gnostic Gospels, obviously, than in the institutionalized dogmatic Christian Gospels. But they'll talk about, where Jesus says it's better to throw a stone around your neck and throw yourself in the ocean than to cause one of my children to fall off the path and everything. Talking about leading people on the spiritual path astray. The children being, like, say, us. We'd be the children because we're so young in ours. Not that I'm trying to label you guys, but generally we're so young. We're so young, we're not very far along, generally, on the path. And that's what the children can represent most of the time. Most of the time. The Gnostic Gospels are really interesting if you read them. Now, a lot of Samael stuff was done without that because that's more recent, right? 1945. He was around in 45.
I've read them.
But yeah, the Nag Hammadi Library and
Yes,
the Dead Sea Scrolls,
yes.
there's a lot of stuff in there. They even talk about this practice of black magic in there, and they talk about that it can't be forgiven. And they talk about the idea also that there's a secret that can't get out, and that's hell is not eternal. Same idea that we have. It's a system of purification that can lead to the divine, but without the merit of free will, is how they explain it in the Gnostic Gospels. Everything that we teach here is based on these ancient Gnostic principles. You can see that Samael had a really good grasp of them. If nothing else, what I tell most people, if they're not into Samael, which is fine, you know, everyone's into their own thing, but like if nothing else, at the lowest possible degree of your acceptance of him, he had a massive amount of knowledge of the esoteric systems of so many different schools, whether it be Buddhism, Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Christianity. So I mean, some people won't take the whole idea of incarnated masters, you know. Some people aren't really into that, but if nothing else, it's undeniable that he was at least this. In my mind, he was what he says he was. Because I've practiced, and they told me to practice something, I practice it. They say this will be the result, and I've seen that result. For me, the proof has mostly been always in the pudding. So it's good to come here and learn it, you know, intellectually, because that's where we start to learn, right? That's how we start to learn all this stuff. But the idea is put it in practice. Like I said, when I had that experience with doing the conjurations, and it made, you know, the nightmares or the bad dreams or the whatever, succubuses and all this stuff stop, I said, there's something to this. I don't know exactly how or why it works yet. Master Samael says it's because of this, but for me, I felt it. And you only have to prove it to yourself, basically. We're not trying to push any ideas on you. We're trying to show you a system. This is a system, right? This is a system. You can apply it or not apply it. It's up to you. But the idea is you'll gain faith through its application. You don't have to take it at my word, obviously, because I'm not an enlightened master or anything. Yes?
So if you're going to do conjurations, what you would say the conjuration of the 4 first, and the conjuration of the 7, then you would do the back of the Gnostic. You would do the Krishnaya and then the...
Yeah, there's another part that follows this also. But
yeah.
There's a whole conjuration of the 4, 7. You do you do the protective circle. You do the invocation of Solomon.
So you would still do that circle, like we would do after Veiling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you would do it after that.
Yeah. All this stuff is like bailing to a higher degree, to a more higher degree. It's the exact same principles that you taught with bailing. This is why we're doing this thing. Same thing. I think that. Oh, there's more. So, yeah, we got time. Master Samael and committee outside the physical body invoke Moloch and sink into the atomic infernos of nature. They see the multitude who inhabit the abyss. They saw an Arab rider wearing a blood-colored robe and oriental turban charge towards them, opening a way among the multitudes. This terrible demon Moloch appears mocking to them and then leaves. Oh, the end. So that's what they saw in the astral. That's how it was appeared in the astral, like you said, which is,
so that was the Arab rider
Was-
a representation of Moloch?
of Moloch, yeah. I don't know if it has anything. Just like how the Greek god has less to do with that than the principle that it is. So that is the lecture.
Wow.
Wow. Well, I missed a whole bunch, so I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
Right, but it'll be online.
Was that all 7, or is the 7th the Satan?
That was all 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with Moloch, I've heard somewhere, or I think I read it somewhere, that he was some sort of representation of actually the physical laws of nature in itself. Like, this physical world is some sort of manifestation of Moloch or Satan or something like that. Is that any bit true?
Yeah, I could apply it to that too. The idea of like sacrificing the baby to being 100% connected to the material world. That's totally like eliminating the spiritual if you fall in love with the material world. I mean, we should be thankful for the material world, obviously, right? And our material bodies, this is the temple we can use, but you can't be too attached with it that you don't want to pursue the spiritual, because this will dust to dust, right? And the spirit to the spirit. So, sure. I mean, you can get way deeper with it if you where I find never take anything literally.
Yeah.
Right? Right? If you take stuff literally, then that's when you start, I think, to get locked into divisions amongst religions and people and divisions amongst systems. When you look at it allegorically, then you can do comparative religions on a scale that says, they're more in common than they do apart. In my own mind, that's what I see. So we'll take a short break, and then we'll do a meditation.
You forgot to include amen.
Oh yeah, amen, amen, amen.
Amen.
We'll talk about that one in the Invocation of Solomon too.